So, thank you all for coming. Let me just see if I can juggle all my equipment. Just a second. Okay. So, my name is Peter Rønsby. Today I'm presenting a project I've been working on for about 2 years.
Can you speak up on the mic?
Yeah, of course. Is this better? Great. So, the project I'm working on is a website to help animal charities be more effective at doing good. The project is called Active for Animals, and on the website you can arrange, record and visualize your activism. So this project is a response to the sometimes inadequate tools we as a movement have to use when doing statistical experiments and recording the data of our activism. So today we will take a look at the tools the site offers that can show you trends, pitfalls and opportunities in your activist strategy. But first I'm going to start off with giving you a brief introduction to the why and how of effective activism. And then I'm going to tell you about my website and what it can do for you. And afterwards we can do a Q&A as time permits. So, when I first started as an activist, I wanted to really make a difference to the animals. And I thought to myself, how can I make people change their opinion? So I went and bought a cheap movie projector, a diesel-powered generator, a DVD player and a couple of speakers. And I set it all up on a city square in Copenhagen and played Meet Your Meat on full blast every Thursday evening. And it was great. If you haven't seen Meet Your Meat before, let me tell you, the screams in that documentary are haunting. So we did this thing, but we didn't really know if it worked. Did we reach people? They certainly reacted when they saw the on-screen horror, and we did give them a flyer. But did we convince them? Did we make a permanent impression in their lives? We didn't really think about that. All that mattered to us was that we showed them. The rest we thought would follow. So what was the lesson? We all want to do good and help others. Yet when our concern is to do good, it stands to reason that we should strive to help as many as possible, as much as possible. In other words, we should maximize the positive effect of our efforts as best we can. Our ability to do as much good as possible has one main obstacle: lack of information. Information is crucial to our ability to optimize our impact. We need to know the consequences of our efforts to determine the right course of action. This is where statistical analysis becomes vital to the effectiveness of the animal rights movement, and thus to the animals. If we are sincere in our wish to help animals, then we owe it to them to attempt to find out which methods of activism has the greatest positive impact. If we hand out flyers, it's important to know which flyers is more likely to make people go vegan. If we collect signatures, it's important to know which petitions collect the highest amount of signatures. And if we fundraise, it's obviously important to know in which ways we can generate the highest amounts of donations. But statistics allow us to go beyond the obvious and help us with nearly all aspects of activism. What locations are best for doing leafleting? How do we spend our resources most efficiently between our local activist groups? In what places of our organization is there most room for improvement? And what are the problems of our least effective strategies? The animal rights movement is one of the most passionate rights groups in history. And this passion and our idealism has been the driving force behind decades of improvement and progression to the lives and rights of animals. Yet our passion often convinces us that what we choose is the most effective thing to do. Is that what we choose is the most effective thing to do, and that our experience with activism makes us great judges to determine effectiveness. Sometimes we seek out activism that appeals to us and look for justification for our choice later. The problem is bias or favoritism. Bias is what's happened when we let our intuition decide our course of action instead of doing what is most effective. Even when we think we know what the best way to help animals is, we must never say because it feels like the intuitive way to do it. This is why we need information or data that we use to determine an effective approach objectively, without relying on intuition. When we gather data and analyze it, we begin to see trends and methods that work better than others. And that is the key to evolve our activism from a happy-go-lucky approach towards being more effective and therefore helping more animals. The point is not to reach perfection, but rather to continue to improve our methods as best we can. So, how do we think and act more effectively? If data is the key element, what constitutes good data and bad data? And how do we collect it? Statistics can be a very rewarding, but also a very complex undertaking. So let's take a simplified example. Say we have two types of flyers that we hand out on the street. The only difference between the types of flyer is that one has a picture of a puppy and the other has a picture of a naked mole rat. Now remember, we cannot let ourselves be seduced by our own bias. Even though we all think the naked mole rat is the cuter animal, we must look at what the data tells us. First, we have to consider what it is we want to know. This determines what kind of data we should gather. In this case, it will be relevant to find out which flyer performs best, so we can concentrate our efforts around that flyer. Next, we have to decide what kind of performance that is relevant to us. If our goal is to reduce animal suffering, then the obvious question is which flyer creates the biggest reduction in the consumption of animal products. To keep things simple, we can just measure how many people accept a flyer of each type. This is a test for take rate. Take rate is a measure of how many people accept a flyer offered to them. If we find there is a significant difference in the take rate between the two flyer types, we may have discovered some valuable insight. Remember that what we want to measure is the difference between the two types of flyer. We must therefore be careful not to let other differences pollute our experiment. This can be challenging because there are a lot of influencing factors. So, first of all, mix the volunteers. If our test has the same volunteers each time we go out leafleting, we may run askew of the results. Imagine having one really good leafleter only on a day when we hand out one specific flyer type. Then we may falsely conclude that the flyer performed really well, when in reality it was the volunteer that excelled. Also, keep the time of day and location. This can also influence our take rate. For example, standing at a busy pedestrian city street will probably yield very different results from leafleting on a small village road. And of course, even keep the weather the same if you can. It may influence our take rate as well, so that is also something we need to keep in mind. So when we log all these factors, we increase the chance that irrelevant data influences our result. We only want the take rate of the two flyer types to matter in our experiment, but often we could only do so much to limit other factors. So in practical terms, there will always be things that interfere with our result data. But basically, this is really it. This example is simplified, but it reflects the methods we use in statistical experiments. So, in essence, first, ask yourself what you want to know and how you can realistically find out. Second, try to keep everything constant aside from the variable you want to measure. And finally, third, the more data you collect, the stronger your conclusion will be. Instead of testing 2 flyer types by handing each out for an hour, try to hand out a lot of flyers before drawing your conclusion. That way, your conclusion is more likely to be statistically significant, meaning that it will not be a result of a random anomaly. Now let's say that we've carried out our experiment and are confident in whatever result we got. Imagine that we find that flyers with a puppy printed on them has a 50% higher take rate than the flyers with naked mole rats on them. How are we to feel about a result like that? Well, let's put it in perspective. If we use an entire event to hand out 1,000 flyers with the naked mole rat on, we could instead have used that time to hand out 1,500 flyers with the puppy printed on them. So let's say that a flyer in general has a 1% chance of making people go vegan. Our simple experiment would mean that we could on average make 5 more people go vegan for every event we hand out the puppy flyer. Now scale this result to your entire organization and the thousands upon thousands of hours your organization spent in total on doing leafleting, and imagine how many more animals you can save. When we let statistics help us improve and refine our methods, materials, and message based on the result of experimentation, we will invariably become better and better at changing people's minds, at reaching them, and make them take the first steps towards a better place for the animals. Now let's talk about how Active for Animals fit in with all of this. The problem is simple. We have somewhat usable tools for arranging events and managing volunteers, and somewhat usable tools for getting statistical feedback. What we don't have is a platform that ties the two together and delivers a unified format across organizations. Some organizations use Facebook and spreadsheets to arrange and record their activism. But I think we can do better. Imagine a platform specifically for arranging activist events. What would that look like? It would have to be extremely easy to get in touch with your volunteers. And it would have to be extremely easy to create events. But it would also be the perfect opportunity to combine the practical side of activism with result data collection. And to this effect, Active for Animals has 2 main goals. First, be the easiest, simplest, and best tool possible for arranging activism. And second, help organizations save the most animals possible. So these 2 goals are tightly connected. It's important that the site is valuable, both to event organizers and organizations overall. Organizations can rarely afford experimentation outside of the work they already do with leafleting, signature collections, and so on. To successfully unite the practical side of leafleting with the theoretical effort of experimentation, Active for Animals offers tools to make your life as event organizer as easy as possible. So let's take a look at it. To plan and carry out your activism using Active for Animals is easy. As with any event, you first specify a date and a place and invite people. And this can be done on the site. Next, you go out and do your street activism, for example, leafleting with your volunteers. And finally, as the event has finished, you go home and type in the results of the event on Active for Animals, for example, number of leaflets handed out. Those 3 steps are all there is to the practical side of using Active for Animals. So let's take a quick look at these features. This is how an event looks like to the public. When your event is new, your volunteers will be able to join it from this page by simply clicking on a join link. And I believe you can see that, hopefully, to the left in the box. So just below the join link, there is a share on Facebook, and you can save it to your Google Calendar. And yet again below that is the event information, such as date and time and location, and which activist group is hosting the event. So you have a map, which you can zoom in and out of to find out where the event is held. And you have a description field where the event organizer can type in whatever practical information they want to give to their volunteers. There's also an attending list which shows what volunteers have accepted the event, and this list is only visible to event organizers and volunteers that have been invited. So the attending list is not visible to the public. So let's take a look at how to create an event like that. So this is the event creation screen of Active for Animals. It's easy to create an event. All you need to do is tell the site where you want to hold the event and when. So first, you set a start and end date and time. So the first line is the start date and the second line is the end date. So when you click on a date, you get a calendar and you can pick any date for that event. Then you type in the event location. You are provided with address suggestions based on your input, just like Google Maps, if you know how that works. When you type in an address in Google Maps, it makes suggestions, and this one does the same. And of course, the location you submit is shown on a large map, which makes it easy for people to find your event. You can add a description to the event, which we saw before on the event page. And you can add reminders to your event. Reminders can be set to remind your volunteers hours, days, weeks, or months in advance. So what we're seeing here is 2 reminders. One is set for 2 hours before the event starts, and the other one is set for 3 days before the event starts. And as you can see at the bottom, there is an add reminder button, so you can add more as you like. So one of the biggest problems event organizers face is managing their volunteer activists. It can be a hassle to keep track of who is attending and who isn't. Add to that the multitude of different ways in which people prefer to be contacted. On Active for Animals, the site handles communication with your volunteers, whether they prefer to be contacted by email or cell phone text message. You don't have to worry about how to contact them. Whatever you do on the site, such as inviting people, reschedule, relocate, or cancel an event, any of these actions will automatically send a message to your volunteers for you. So let's take a look at that part of it. So now we scroll down the page, and we see a list of participants to the event. So what we can see here is that there are about 5 participants. Some of them have an email address connected to them, and others have a cell phone number. As you may notice, in the upper right corner there is a checkbox to add all participants that are attached to your group. And if you look at this particular participant, you can see that there is a green check mark next to the cell phone number. And this means that the participant has replied back to from your invitation with an accept. So you can get a very quick overview over who has accepted your event and who hasn't. So, and of course you can add more participants if you like. So when your volunteers receive an invitation from the site, they can reply in the easiest way possible. A simple click on an accept or decline button tells the site whether they have joined your event or not. So let's take a look at that. This is an email invitation sent out to a volunteer automatically from the site. So as soon as you created your event, this email was sent out to your volunteers. And as you can see, it has basically the same information as the event page. There's a time and date and a location. The event description is included as well. But the most interesting feature for you as an event organizer is the accept and decline button, because those are really, really easy to use. You simply click on the accept button to make your choice known to the event organizer. So as the volunteer receives the email, all they have to do is click on the accept button. They don't have to log in or do anything else. As soon as they click on that button, their answer is known. And this even works with cell phone text messages. So let's take a look at that. So this is an text message received by a volunteer as an invitation to your event. And as we can see here, there's basically the same information, although we have to compress it a little to make room enough. There's the date and the time and the location. And then there are the same two choices, accept and decline. And this works the exact same way as it did with the email. As soon as the volunteer clicks on touches the accept or decline link, the answer to their answer is instantly known on the site. And of course, when they reply to your invitation, you are instantly notified. So, speaking of cell phones, with Active for Animals, you can use any device to arrange events, manage your volunteers, and type in results. You can use an internet-enabled cell phone on the street. So if you're standing out on the street and you want to arrange an event, or you want to type in the result of an event that has just concluded, you can use an internet-enabled cell phone to do just that. The site shapes itself to fit your display. And you can, of course, use a tablet on the couch or a desktop or laptop computer as whatever you want. So, let's say that our event has concluded and we need to type in the event data. If your organization is already doing leafleting, collecting signatures, doing pay-per-view events or other kinds of activism, you may be familiar with the hardships of collecting data. It's often a neglected and cumbersome task for the busy event organizer to keep track of and record the results of an activist event. But on Active for Animals, it's easy. The same event page that you use to arrange your activism on can be used to type in the results afterwards. Notice here that when we edit the event, the middle part of it has been replaced with a result section, like this. So this is the same event page, only as the time has run out for the event, a result section is now in place. So let's type in the results of our leafleting event. The first field we type in is work hours. We're just scrolling down again to the result section, and the first field is work hours. Work hours is a measure of the total time spent doing leafleting. So if you have 3 volunteers and the event takes an hour, you would input 3 hours in total. Typing in work hours for our event, let us calculate leaflets per person per hour, which is a nice metric to have. So let's now type in the number of leaflets. Notice here that I have checked this is a leafleting event. I could also check this is a fundraising event. Some organizations, for some organizations, leafleting events are mixed with fundraising. So the point here is that you can add data for multiple metrics for each event, in case you do different activities at the same event. But here we have checked off this is a leafleting event, and as we do so, the input for number of leaflets appears to us, and we can type in that. So the last thing we can do, and perhaps the most interesting thing, is adding tags to our event. We can describe the event using tags such as chicken costume or rainy weather. And tags are a powerful way to describe events. So to add a tag to the event, the organizer simply clicks on it. So as you can see here, I've clicked on fox costume, puppy flyer, and I'm about to click on the sunny weather tag. So the point of tags, as I said before, is to describe the event. But there are some problems using freeform tagging, which is where you allow the event organizer to type in whatever tags they like. We need to use the same language when we describe our events across our activist groups and optimally across organizations as well. So what Active for Animals does is it allows the organization to define a list of tags that each event organizer uses to describe their event with. And in that way, you are assured that at least within your organization, the same language is used to describe your events with. So why is that important? We'll get back to that a little bit later. So let's say that we have used Active for Animals to host our activism for some time. Your activist groups have created a good number of events and recorded the results. To visualize your activism, you can use the query builder. The query builder answers questions about your organization's performance. How well do your leafleting teams perform in rainy weather? Is it worth spending effort on this street corner at 11 a.m.? And on what weekdays do we hand out most flyers? The query builder helps to answer your questions with charts, graphs, and maps. For example, with a few clicks, you can get an up-to-date graph of cumulative leaflets handed out for each group, distributed across weeks. This gives you instant feedback on the performance of your activist groups and makes it easy for you to make projections on the overall goals of your organization. So let's go over that one more time, a bit slower. On your left side here, we've defined leaflets as our metric. Those are the ones we want to visualize. And we've told our query builder that we want the running total to be shown, or cumulative leaflets, which means that we add all the previous results to the current day. So we get a rising line of leaflets handed out, distributed across weeks. As you can see at the bottom, we have set the time span to weeks. So what we're seeing here on the graph is all the local activist groups of this particular organization, and the blue line at the top is all of them combined. So this makes it really easy for us to visualize our activism. So this is just one example of it. So let's take a bit more complex example. In this chart, we track two different metrics: event types, such as leafleting events, and number of leaflets handed out. We've set the time span to weekdays. So this shows us which days have the most events and how many leaflets have been handed out on each weekday. And since we track these two metrics in the same graph, we can see if there is any disproportionality between leafleting events and leaflets handed out. So again, on the left side, we have set the metric to leaflets, and on the right side, we have set the metric to events. So one interesting thing here is that the column is our leaflets and the line is our events. So as we can see, on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays, there's a proportionality between the amount of leaflets we've handed out and the amount of events we've hosted. But on Tuesdays, there seems to be a lot more leaflets handed out than there are events held, at least proportionally. And so we might ask ourselves, why is that? This seems like a good opportunity to delve into this, figure out why there's a difference there. But let's go even further. We can filter results using the same tags that event organizers use to describe the event with. Tags are a powerful way to enrich your events that enable you to ask much more complex questions, such as, is the chicken costume a benefit to our leafleting work? Or does rainy weather influence our performance on this street corner? And as we saw before, we can, whenever we add tags to an event, we can then use them here in the query builder. We can also generate pie charts that instantly show us the distribution of leaflets handed out across our activist groups. So that's what we're seeing here. Each slice of the pie is amount of leaflets handed out for one of our activist groups in the organization. And say you want to know the leafleting performance across the city where your teams work. You can use a heat map to display the leaflet distribution across the city streets, or use the heat map to show where most events are held. You can also ask more specific questions by filtering your query on specific addresses, for example, if you want to know what the leafleting performance is on a certain street or town square. So that's what we're seeing here. If you haven't seen this before, a heat map is a bit like a weather map where the concentration of red spots mean that there are more events held in that particular spot. So when you combine all these features, you end up with a powerful tool to help you discover trends, pitfalls, and opportunities in your activist strategy. And naturally, you can both import and export data, should you want to bring in results from previous events that you have already recorded, or export the data for keeping and processing in statistical software. So, to summarize what we've talked about today, it's simple to get in touch with your volunteers. They can respond with a one-touch action, and you can add them all and reach them with email or text message. Active for Animals combines the practical side of activism with statistics, so it's very easy for your event organizers to get you the statistical data you need to discover how your activism is doing. And finally, we have easy result data visualization. So it's easy for us to discover how, as I said before, how we're doing. It takes very few clicks to get an instant up-to-date graph or map. So, hopefully by now you have a good picture of what Active for Animals can do today. So while the site is ready for you to try out, consider it also a voice in the discussion on what we as a movement want to do. It's a discussion about the broader question of being effective and what that means. But it's also a discussion about how we combine the practical aspect of street activism with the result-oriented methods of effective activism. So I'd like to talk a little about a few future developments that I'm currently working on, which will hopefully bring this discussion further. Perhaps the most important question and holy grail of activism is how good we are at getting people to make a change. There are different ways to measure this change, and Active for Animals can play a role in capturing the data of these methods. So one way to do it is to use survey questionnaires to figure out how many people have changed their lifestyle based on the content of a flyer. Questionnaires are given out to people after they have received a flyer, to find out if they went vegan. Now imagine that people's replies to these questions can be integrated and compared with the rest of Active for Animals data. And you get some amazing opportunities to reduce suffering. Another way to track conversions is by using Google Analytics. Some flyers have a website printed on them, usually with a link to a vegan or vegetarian starter kit. To see how many people visit the website link printed on a flyer, it's possible to attach your Google Analytics account to Active for Animals and add, for example, the new users metric to the query builder. This means that on Active for Animals, you can get a graph of website hits versus leaflets handed out. So the point of this is to have impact measurement, or how many people went vegan, integrated with the rest of Active for Animals, so that you have a complete view of your activist strategy at your fingertips. So, what I'm also working on is a much more flexible way for organizations to tailor their own experiments and activist campaigns. If you want to track a completely new metric, such as audience members attending a presentation, you can quickly and easily add it and give your organizers the option to record data with that metric, instead of number of leaflets or amount of signatures. And this flexibility gives you powerful new ways to experiment and expand your activity. So, the only way for this project to grow and improve is with your voice. Let me know what you think. Do you think it's a bad or a good idea? Do you see potentials or problems in my approach? Are there things you would like to have? features you need, or new kinds of activism you want to measure. With your help, comments and suggestions, we can make a difference for the animals. Thank you. Yeah, please.
One thing I wanted to add, maybe you have the accept and decline button, right? But I mostly find myself unsure if I'm going to go to this event or not. So it might be a good idea to maybe add a third button saying I'm not sure yet, and then be reminded the day after again, and then the ads are set the second time.
Right, that's a really good idea. I'm typing it down now. A maybe button.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, sorry. So what was noted here was that in my invitations, whether it's by email or text message, there are only two choices: an accept and decline. So we might want to add a third choice, which is maybe. And when you click on maybe, you will be continually reminded of the event and can make your choice at a later time. So that was the feature suggestion. And it's written down. Thank you for that. Yes?
In the beginning of the presentation, you had this example with the two different leaflets, two different animals, right? And we want to measure which leaflet is taken more often. Was the idea that the two leaflets are the same and it's just a picture which differs? Or do you make the assumption that, I don't know, that of all taken leaflets, 1% is becoming vegan?
So the 1% number is maybe not the most realistic number, but for illustrative purposes it can be used. But to answer your question, which was there more difference to the two types of flyers that I showed previously than just the pictures? The answer is no. The point here of the experiment is to show that when we change just one variable, which in this case is the picture used on the flyer, then it's very interesting to see if there's any difference between the take rate of the two types of flyer. And that really ties into the point of locking our variables, those we don't want to measure, and just keeping the one variable we want to measure open. Yes?
How do you really measure how many people go vegan with such a flyer? You said something about a survey, but normally in a busy street you never meet the same people again. So are there any, that's not directly related, connected to your project, but how can you realistically measure this? I don't know.
Right.
You ask the people to click on a certain link if they went vegan. Do they do that?
Well, so the question was, how can we know if a flyer actually turned people vegan? And while it is very difficult to figure that out on the face of it, we can use statistics to help us draw a picture of the chance that a flyer will make people go vegan. This isn't exactly my field of expertise, but there are some great studies on it by for example, the Humane Labs and Animal Charity Evaluators. That's a good website to go in and check out the. They have survey questionnaires where you can just pick one of them and use that to ask people if they turned vegan afterwards, and they have some clever ways to figure that out. Yes. Yes, thank you for that comment. So the feature request here was that it should be possible to send out invitations through Facebook, and this is something I'm currently working on. I think it's very important that as that the site tries to adapt to whatever methods you as event organizers and organizations use to reach your volunteers. So messaging through Facebook is something I'm working on. It's a little complex, but I'm sure I'm going to figure it out soon. Yes?
If you uploaded all of your activists onto this website, can you do it by location? So if you had activists all over Europe and were doing a demonstration in Oslo, could you automatically then invite all the people who live in that area?
So the question was, can I filter volunteers based on their location? That's an interesting feature. The way I thought about it initially was that you can create an activist group on the site, and that group serves as the abstraction for whatever location your activists are in. So, for example, if you have an activist group in a specific city, you would create an activist group on the website and add your volunteers to that group. But there will absolutely be room for more flexibility in this approach. I think there was one down there.
In Holland, and I'm sure in all of Europe, we have these privacy laws nowadays. And if I understand correctly, as an organization or a grassroots group, you're putting in the data, telephone numbers, email addresses of your activists or members. How is that with your website or app arranged with privacy laws? In Holland, we have to have registration at the registration chambers, for instance.
Right.
And officially, if our group would join your app and put in the data, private data of our members and activists, you would also have to have a privacy registration chamber that you are connected to, or for instance, do you have that?
Right.
Here in Germany, or do you have it there?
Yeah. So the question is, how do we preserve the privacy of our volunteers when, if they don't want to be contacted, or if they don't want their contact information to appear on a website? So first of all, let me say that their contact information is at no point in time publicly available on the site. But other than that, I'm working on methods to allow people to unsubscribe from the invitations, which is basically the only kind of communication that are carried out on the site. So there is a do not call list attached to this. Beyond that, well, I'm sure there are some legal requirements that I need to read up on, but all in good time.
Because the next thing, I'm sure I'll have to read up on it, but I think under Dutch law, we would actually first have to ask our members and activists if they would agree with us putting their data into your website. That would be an extra difficulty.
Right. Thank you. I'll type that down. The legislation is a little different for every country. Sometimes it's just EU legislation. So I'll have to check that out. So,
There is a way to basically sign up on the website and then agreeing that different organizations can add it to a list. So it's maybe an easier way.
that would be one solution, yeah. It's possible to create a profile on the website today, but I think most volunteers don't necessarily want to join a completely new site and do all sorts of things to manage a profile on some strange new site that they haven't visited before. So to that effect, the action they are required to do to give feedback, respond to invitations on Active for Animals is minimal. Yes? Sorry.
As you handle time, and second thing, for example, let's say we're making an information store and we need a card to get the material away again. So is it possible to set up a scheme for an event, like that I say, okay, we need somebody who will go to the card there, we will take it back, we need 2 people from 12 to 6 p.m. and 2 people from 6 to 6 p.m.
Yeah, that's a very interesting feature. So the feature requested is that it's possible to make task-related time slots that people then can sign up for. Did I understand it correct? Yeah. So, for example, if you want to prepare an event, you need a lot of practical work before, and people can join up to do that thing. It's not something that can be done right now, but that's very interesting. I've written it down. Yes?
But I realize sometimes these activists who are just living in neighboring town and I've never met them before, even though they've been active for quite some time. So would your website allow to send an invitation to all the activists in a special region I can define as a host of an event?
So this is a new region.
I probably don't know all the vegan or animal rights activists in my city, but I could send as a host of an event I could define a city and maybe send the invitation to all those.
That's very interesting. So what is basically being suggested here is a kind of activist dating site, if I may be so bold, where you can, for instance, see on a map all the different activists that are in your city and are willing to do activism. Not necessarily someone who is attached to an organization, but just someone who has made their desire to attend an event known. And that's a very interesting suggestion. I've written it down. Yes? Right, thank you. So when is the site done, and is the site done? So yes, the site is done, but consider it a progressive site in the sense that I really want feedback from you, as you've delivered today, to help me shape the site, because I have some ideas about how the site should work to be the best tool for event activism. But I really want your input on shaping it further. And to that effect, I wouldn't say that it's super finished, because it will probably never be, but it's definitely usable at the moment. And with your input, it can become even better. I'm sorry, and to the second question, I don't have a mailing list, but if you want my card, please come up afterwards, and I have a stack of them that I can give out to you. Yeah. So the question is my site open source? Yes, it is. It is open source and it's free to use for any organization. I can't comment on the specifics at this time, but I believe firmly in the open source idealism. Yes?
Are you working alone on the website, or do you have friends who will help you? Or many? Are you 10 people, or are you only one?
So the question is, am I the only one working on the website? And regarding coding, yes, I'm the only one at the moment. I've had help on the designing part, and I get a lot of help on the statistics part, which isn't my strong suit. So at the moment, there are people advising me on how to make the site move forward. Yes? Right. So the question or the point is made that there's a potential security problem in collecting all this data, which is of course a good point. I'm not sure how much I can do about that. We only track legal activism in this context, so it's not as if we are tracking ALF activities, breaking into meat lockers or whatever. So at least the police can't track that using our website. But your point is well taken, and it's something. It's one of the things that I would love to discuss. So we can make sure that everyone feels safe using this, and there are the appropriate mechanism in place to assure whatever level of detail or you want on the site. Anything else? Nope. All right. Thank you for listening in.